I never imagined I'd be standing here, carrying my daughter in my arms, watching my life unravel before my eyes. My world once had a harmony, a rhythm that felt like home. My wife, Emma, and I built what I thought was a life anchored in love and trust. But lately, that harmony had turned to dissonance. The subtle shifts in Emma's behavior had been gnawing at me, whispering that something was amiss, yet I clung to hope, trying to ignore the looming storm. Today, we were at my mother's house after my grandfather's funeral. My 3-year-old Lily was a bright spot on this dark day. As I buckled her into the car seat, her tiny voice pulled me back to reality. "Daddy, why didn't Mommy come with us to say goodbye to Grandpa?" Her question caught me off guard. I took a deep breath. "Mommy had to work, sweetheart. She'll be there when we get home." Lily didn't buy it, and maybe neither did I. Her sad eyes looked into mine as though searching for something more than a vague explanation. The honesty in her gaze sliced through me, filling me with doubts I tried so hard to suppress. Her mother's excuses, the late night, work meetings, the increasing distance. How much longer could I ignore it? The drive home felt like an eternity, my mind racing. Could my daughter, at just 3 years old, be sensing the same things I was? If she noticed the absence, the silence, what did that say about my marriage? As we pulled into our driveway, there was Emma, as if nothing had changed. Lily rushed inside, chattering about the cousins she'd seen. I followed, my heart heavy and filled with questions. Tonight, I was determined to get some answers. Entering the house, I noticed Emma getting ready. Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed her face focused as she applied her makeup. She wore her best dress, the kind she used to put on for our dates, back when things felt genuine between us. I stood at the doorway, observing her in silence, trying to remember the last time she dressed up for me, the last time she'd cared to spend a night out together. It felt like a lifetime ago. She glanced at me in the mirror, barely meeting my eyes, and returned to her eyeliner, as if I were just another part of the room. Heading out, I tried to sound casual, though my throat tightened with a mix of frustration and dread. "Yeah, you know it's Friday," she replied, not looking up, her tone casual as though it was expected I'd already know. But Friday used to mean us. Date night. A small ritual we held to keep the spark alive. Now, it was just another night for her to be somewhere else. What happened to spending time with me and Lily? I pressed, keeping my voice steady. My stomach churned, each word weighted with memories of a time when her response would have been different. "Don't make it an issue, all right?" She sighed, capping her eyeliner and reaching for her lipstick. "I need my space, okay? You're making a big deal out of nothing." Nothing. The words stung like ice water down my spine. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay composed. But there it was again, that dismissiveness, that casual brush-off that had replaced warmth. And here I was, seeing it clearly for the first time, like a crack in glass that had only just begun to shatter. Emma finished her makeup, standing up to give me a quick, hollow kiss. "Love you," she said automatically, her voice empty, her gaze avoiding mine. I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Right. Love you, too." I wasn't even sure who I was saying it to anymore. As she picked up her purse and slipped on her heels, a sinking realization crept in. This wasn't just a one-off. This was a pattern, a routine I'd chosen to ignore, hoping it would change. But tonight, that hope was gone. When she left, silence settled over the house, heavy and oppressive. I sank onto the couch, watching Lily play quietly in the corner, innocent and unaware of the distance growing between her parents. I wondered what she'd feel if she knew. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about our family. I had to know the truth. Once Emma was gone, the house felt hollow. The quietness settled in like dust, piling up over everything. I sat there, still as stone, trying to make sense of the growing chasm between us. I'd always trusted Emma, but tonight, I could feel my trust crumbling under the weight of too many unanswered questions. After putting Lily to bed, I walked into our bedroom, the air thick with a lingering perfume she rarely wore at home. My gaze drifted to her vanity, where her phone lay charging. She was usually guarded about her phone, a habit that hadn't bothered me until now. Something in me, it might have been desperation or fear, pushed me to pick it up. I tapped the screen, only to find it was locked. Emma had set up a new passcode recently, and my gut twisted at the realization that I wasn't privy to it. I returned the phone to its place, feeling foolish and out of place in my own marriage. But the impulse to know, to uncover whatever she was hiding, didn't wane. Moving around the room, I noticed things I hadn't before. A receipt on her dresser from a high-end restaurant I knew we hadn't been to together. The date was from last Saturday, a night she'd claimed was spent with her friends. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of suspicion and denial, each one tearing at my composure. With a sigh, I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, and paced the kitchen. The memory of Lily's innocent question echoed in my mind. Why doesn't Mommy love us anymore? I clenched my fists, feeling an anger mixed with heartbreak. My 3-year-old could see it. How had I been so blind? Determined to stop guessing, I pulled out my laptop and started searching for answers. I found a locator app, one I'd seen used in a work security presentation months ago. Downloading it, I set up the app, hoping it would bring clarity. If she truly was out with friends, there was nothing to fear. But if it was more than that, well, I wasn't sure what I'd do. I activated the locator and felt my pulse quicken as I watched the screen. A small blinking, representing her phone, showing her location across town at an address I didn't recognize. I stared at the dot, the anger simmering into something else, a cold resolve. Tonight, I'd find out where she really was. And if this suspicion was right, there'd be no turning back. The locator dot blinked steadily on my screen, mocking me with its presence across town. A chill crept through me. The address wasn't a restaurant, wasn't her friend's house. It was an upscale apartment complex, one we'd never had reason to visit. I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding, as a strange calm washed over me. I had to know. The drive across town was a blur. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. By the time I reached the address, it was almost surreal. A place I'd driven past many times but had never paid attention to. Now, its sleek glass facade and glowing lights felt ominous, hiding secrets I wasn't ready to confront. Parking across the street, I killed the engine and took a moment to gather myself. My hands clenched around the steering wheel as I watched the building, hoping for any sign of her. But after several long minutes, no one came out, and the blinds on the upper floors remained closed. I checked the locator on my phone again, and the dot was still there. Part of me wanted to turn back, to ignore what I was doing and return home. But the other part, the part that had grown tired of her excuses and lies, wouldn't allow it. I got out of the car and walked to the building, adrenaline flooding my veins with every step. Inside the lobby, I approached the front desk, where a young man sat, engrossed in his phone. He barely glanced up as I asked, "Excuse me, is there a way to call up to an apartment? I'm looking for my wife. She was supposed to be here to meet someone." He gave me a skeptical look, raising an eyebrow. "What's her name?" "Emma. Emma Lockwood," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He typed something into his computer, then shook his head. "Sorry, no one by that name in the guest list tonight." My stomach twisted. I thanked him and stepped back, watching the building's directory screen flicker. The calm facade I'd managed to keep was cracking, the realization sinking in deeper. She hadn't just been lying. She was actively hiding something. I turned and left, stepping into the cool night air. Back in my car, I gripped my phone, looking at that blinking dot one more time before I made a decision. This wasn't over. Tonight might not have given me the answers I wanted, but I wasn't giving up. Tomorrow, I'd confront her. I'd look her in the eye and demand the truth, whatever that truth was. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, the events of the night before playing on a loop in my head. The calm resolve that had carried me through the night had solidified into something firmer, determination. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep pretending anymore. Today was the day I'd confront her, demand the truth. Emma came downstairs, looking as if she'd had the best night's sleep of her life. She greeted me with a casual morning, like it was any other day, and began making coffee. I watched her, taking in every detail, the lack of guilt in her expression, the normalcy in her actions. It was infuriating. I waited until she'd finished pouring her coffee before I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma, we need to talk. She looked up, a slight frown crossing her face. What's wrong? What's wrong? I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. You tell me, where were you last night? Her frown deepened, and she avoided my gaze. I told you, I was with friends. No, Emma, I said, my voice firmer. I followed you. I know you weren't with any friends. I watched as her face went pale, her grip on the coffee mug tightening. Why were you following me? She attempted to shift the focus, her tone defensive. Do you not trust me? That's not an answer, I replied, refusing to let her deflect. Where were you? Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. She took a deep breath, setting down the mug and crossing her arms. All right, fine. I was visiting someone. Visiting someone? I repeated, anger boiling beneath my calm exterior. Who? She hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. Just someone I met recently. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded. Because if it's innocent, why the lies? Why the late nights and constant excuses? Emma exhaled sharply, looking away as if gathering her thoughts. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted it to come to this. Come to what? My voice cracked, and I hated the vulnerability that slipped out. She looked up, her eyes filled with something between guilt and defiance. It's complicated, okay? I just needed space, something outside of this routine, outside of us. The words stung, slicing deeper than I thought possible. After everything we'd been through, after the life we'd built, she felt this way? The urge to lash out, to demand answers, was overwhelming, but I held back, struggling to keep my emotions in check. So you're saying this affair, because let's be real, that's what it is because you're bored? My voice was laced with disbelief. It's not that simple, she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. I love you, I really do, but I don't know how to explain what's happening. I didn't mean for it to get this far. My chest tightened, a mix of heartbreak and anger swirling inside me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have turned our life into a lie. She looked away, and I realized that, in her silence, she was admitting the truth. She had betrayed me. My life, my family, everything I'd fought to protect and cherish. It had been taken from me, not by some external force, but by the person I'd trusted most. I stood there, feeling the weight of her betrayal sink in. We're done, Emma, I said, my voice barely holding steady. If this is what you want, then there's no place for me here. I left the room before she could say another word. I knew that if I stayed, if I listened to more of her excuses, I'd lose the resolve that was keeping me afloat. This was the beginning of the end, and I had no intention of looking back. I locked myself in my office, trying to absorb the shock of what had just happened. The house was quiet, and I could hear Emma moving around in the kitchen, likely gathering her thoughts. Part of me wanted to give her a chance to explain further, but the larger part, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, refused to consider it. Her silence spoke louder than any excuses she could offer. Minutes passed, then an hour, but I couldn't sit still. I picked up my phone, scrolling aimlessly until I stopped at the contact for my best friend, Mark. He'd been my rock through countless situations, and I knew he'd understand. Maybe even have some advice that didn't involve burning everything to the ground. Mark picked up on the first ring. Hey man, what's up? You sound off. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my voice steady. Emma, she's been lying. I think she's having an affair. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then Mark sighed. I'm so sorry, man. I can't imagine how you're feeling right now. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I feel. It's like I'm numb and furious at the same time. I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles white. I don't know what to do next. Do I confront her again? Do I just walk away? Mark's voice softened. This isn't easy, I know, but maybe this is a sign to take a step back and think. If she's lied this much, she might not stop unless there are consequences. You need time to figure out what you want. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. He was right. This wasn't just about Emma's lies. It was about what I was willing to endure, what boundaries I'd set for myself. And right now, those boundaries were firm. "Thanks, Mark," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed to hear that. "Anytime, man. You deserve better. And if she can't see that, then she's the one losing out." His words were like a bomb, but the pain was still raw. After I hung up, I went upstairs, hoping that a shower might wash away some of the frustration and helplessness that clung to me. The steam clouded the room, and I stood under the hot water, feeling the weight of everything sink deeper into my bones. I didn't know what the future looked like, but I knew one thing: things couldn't go back to the way they were. Stepping out of the shower, I dried off and glanced in the mirror, meeting my own reflection with a mixture of resolve and sorrow. Today had opened a door I'd hoped to never pass through, and there was no going back. When I returned to the bedroom, Emma was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face streaked with tears. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, a flicker of hope mingling with regret. "Please, just give me a chance to explain," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you like this." I felt a wave of anger rise, but I pushed it down. "Then why did you?" She looked down, unable to answer, and in that silence, I found the clarity I needed. There was nothing left for us to salvage if she couldn't even answer the simplest of questions. I walked out, my heart heavy but my resolve unbroken. I'd heard enough. The next few days were a blur, an endless stretch of hours where I vacillated between anger and heartbreak. Emma avoided me, and I avoided her. She stayed out of the house for most of the day, returning late at night, while I focused on taking care of Lily and trying to keep things as normal as possible for her. One evening, while putting Lily to bed, she asked, "Daddy, why isn't Mommy here to say goodnight?" Her innocent question hit me harder than any confrontation with Emma ever could. I knelt by her bed, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "Mommy's busy, sweetheart," I said softly, though I could barely get the words out. It was a half-truth, but Lily deserved more than the bitter reality of our crumbling marriage. Lily looked at me with those big, questioning eyes, and I realized that she sensed more than I'd thought. "Will Mommy be here tomorrow?" "I don't know, honey," I replied, unable to hide the strain in my voice. "But I'll always be here, no matter what." She gave me a small nod, her little fingers clutching her blanket. I kissed her forehead, feeling a fresh wave of determination wash over me. I couldn't change what Emma had done, but I could ensure that Lily felt secure and loved. After putting her to sleep, I went downstairs and found myself staring at the family photos on the wall. Pictures of happier times, vacations, birthdays, moments that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. The smile on my face in those photos looked almost foreign now, a reminder of what I'd thought we had: a life, a future, a family. But the reality was different, and I had to start accepting it. The next morning, I sat down with a list and started planning. My future had been wrapped up in Emma for so long that the thought of separating our lives felt overwhelming. But for my sake, and Lily's, I needed to do it. I had to focus on creating a new future, one that didn't revolve around lies and betrayal. I contacted a lawyer, a recommendation from Mark, who'd gone through a divorce himself a few years back. It felt surreal, the thought of officially ending things, but as I dialed the number, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was as if a weight was lifting, a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. After arranging a meeting with the lawyer, I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of clarity. Emma had chosen her path, and now I had to choose mine. Later that evening, Emma came home, looking more haggard than usual. She hesitated in the doorway, as if sensing the shift in my demeanor. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering, a newfound resolve in my voice. "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "This isn't working, and I think we both know it." She looked away, a flicker of shame crossing her face. Are you really going to leave?" "I don't see any other choice," I replied, the words feeling both heavy and liberating. "You made your decision, and I can't live like this anymore." For the first time, she didn't argue. She simply nodded, her eyes downcast. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the apology felt hollow, too late to change anything. I nodded, accepting her words but knowing they meant little now. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of something new. The meeting with the lawyer was set for the next morning. As I walked into the law office, I could feel my pulse quickening, a mix of nerves and a strange kind of anticipation. This was it, the first official step towards severing the ties that had once defined my life. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rachel, shook my hand and led me into her office. "Divorces aren't easy, especially when there are children involved," she said, her voice calm and steady. "But if you're ready to move forward, I'll guide you through the process." I explained the situation, careful to keep my emotions in check, though my anger and hurt surfaced now and then. Rachel took notes, nodding as I talked. When I finished, she looked at me with a sympathetic, yet firm expression. "We'll file for custody of your daughter, and we'll push for a fair division of assets," she said, her tone professional yet compassionate. "Your wife's behavior is likely to weigh heavily in your favor, but I need you to be prepared for a fight. Custody battles can get ugly, especially if one party is looking to keep up appearances." A chill ran through me as I imagined the potential battles ahead. But for Lily's sake, I was willing to face it. I couldn't bear the thought of her growing up in an environment clouded by deception and distrust. As I left the office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was doing this for myself, but more importantly, for Lily. She deserved stability, a home free from the shadow of her mother's choices. When I returned home, Emma was in the living room, her eyes red from what looked like hours of crying. She glanced at me, her face a mixture of regret and sorrow. "Are you really going through with this?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes, Emma. I can't keep pretending this didn't happen. We owe it to Lily to give her a stable life, and we can't do that together anymore." She looked away, her shoulders sagging. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It went exactly as far as you allowed it to," I replied, my voice steady, though I felt a pang of pain at her words. "You had a choice, Emma, and you made it." For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of defiance in her eyes, as if she wanted to argue, to defend herself. But instead, she fell silent, her face pale. That night, I slept in the guest room, a hollow ache in my chest as I lay alone. The silence was deafening, filled with all the memories of what we'd once had. But those memories were just that, moments from a past that no longer existed. In the morning, I awoke to find a note on the kitchen table. Emma had left early, probably to avoid any more confrontations. Part of me felt relief, but there was a gnawing sadness that lingered, a sadness that this was how things were ending. I glanced at the note, a simple apology scrawled in her handwriting, but it did nothing to soothe the ache. I knew I was on the right path, but the journey was only beginning, and I was determined to face it head-on, no matter what challenges lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, life became a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and difficult conversations. Rachel moved swiftly, filing for custody and preparing for what could be a drawn-out battle. She warned me of the potential obstacles, including Emma's likely attempt to appear as the stable, committed mother. It didn't make sense to me after everything she'd done, but I understood her need to maintain appearances. At night, when the house was quiet, I would sit with Lily, reading her bedtime stories and answering her endless stream of questions about why Mommy wasn't around as much. I tried to be honest without burdening her young mind, explaining that sometimes grown-ups have trouble staying together, but that I would always be there for her. She accepted my words with a child's resilience, though there were moments when her quiet acceptance tore at my heart. One evening, as I was tucking her in, she asked, "Daddy, do you still love Mommy?" Her innocent eyes searched mine, and I felt my chest tighten. How could I answer that? How could I explain the mixture of love, betrayal, and heartbreak that had settled within me? "I'll always care about her, sweetie," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But sometimes people change, and we have to move forward in different ways." She seemed to ponder this, nodding slowly before reaching up to give me a hug. In that moment, I promised myself I'd do everything I could to protect her, to ensure that this turmoil didn't steal her innocence or disrupt her happiness. The custody hearings began shortly after. Emma's lawyer wasted no time painting her as the caring, devoted mother who had simply been under a lot of stress. They tried to minimize her behavior, attributing it to the challenges of work-life balance and the pressures of motherhood. I sat there, biting my tongue as I listened, feeling the injustice gnaw at me. My attorney Rachel, however, remained calm and composed, countering their arguments with a steady confidence. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and spoke honestly, describing the love and dedication I had for Lily, my active role in her life, and the hurtful behaviors that had led us to this point. I spoke of Emma's increasing distance, her unexplained absences, and how it had affected Lily. As I spoke, I could see Emma looking down, her face void of expression, as if shutting herself off from the reality of what she'd done. Days stretched into weeks as we went back and forth in court, each side presenting evidence and testimonies. Friends and family members were called in to give statements, each trying to paint a picture of who was the more suitable parent. It was draining, emotionally and physically, to have every detail of our lives scrutinized and dissected. Then came the day Rachel had warned me about. Emma's lawyer presented a character witness, a mutual friend who'd once been close to both of us. He spoke in her favor, describing her as a loving and attentive mother who had been going through a difficult time. It stung, hearing someone I trusted vouch for her, but I knew there was nothing I could do to change his perspective. That night, I couldn't sleep. The reality of the battle we were in weighed heavily on me, filling me with doubts and fears. What if I lost? What if I couldn't protect Lily from the chaos that Emma's choices had brought into our lives? But as I lay there in the dark, I reminded myself of the promise I'd made to Lily, the promise to keep her safe and give her a stable, loving home. No matter how long this fight took, I was willing to endure it for her. After weeks of hearings, the tension reached a boiling point. Each day seemed like an endless battle in court, both sides slinging their arguments, both trying to paint the other in shades of guilt. I'd grown accustomed to the courtroom's cold sterility, but my resolve hadn't wavered. I was doing this for Lily, for her future and stability. One morning, as I was preparing to head to court, Rachel called me with news that could shift everything. "There's been a new development," she said, her voice calm but intense. "It turns out Emma's been seeing someone, and we have credible evidence." My breath hitched. Though I'd suspected it, having proof was different. "How solid is it?" I asked, barely able to contain the mixture of relief and anger. "Solid enough," she replied. "Photos, dates, even witness testimonies. This changes things. It shows a pattern of dishonesty and undermines her claims of being a devoted mother. I think we can use this to establish your case for primary custody." Hearing that made everything feel surreal, as if the ground beneath me had shifted. Emma's lies had finally caught up to her. As much as it stung to know the truth, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Now I had more than my word. I had the hard evidence that might protect Lily from this mess. At the courthouse, I watched as Rachel presented the evidence, laying out a timeline that shattered Emma's carefully constructed image. The photos showed her with the man she'd been seeing, dates aligning with the nights she'd claimed to be with friends. The judge reviewed the details, and I could see his expression hardening, a flicker of disappointment that no amount of defense could counter. Emma's face paled as the evidence stacked up, her composure cracking for the first time. She looked away, her shoulders slumping as if finally accepting the weight of her choices. It wasn't triumph that I felt. It was an odd mixture of vindication and sadness. Despite everything, part of me had hoped she'd come clean on her own. After a long deliberation, the judge announced his decision. I was granted primary custody of Lily, with Emma receiving visitation rights. It was as close to a victory as I could have hoped for, but it felt bittersweet. I wasn't the type of father who wanted to separate a child from her mother, but I knew that this was the best decision for Lily's well-being. Later that day, when I returned home with Lily, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, though the victory felt muted by the cost of everything we'd lost. Lily was thrilled, unaware of the gravity of what had just happened, and she spent the afternoon playing and talking about school. Watching her joy, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what mattered, her happiness, her stability. That night, after I put Lily to bed, I allowed myself a moment to finally breathe, to let go of the tension I'd been holding for so long. I'd fought for her, for both of us, and now we had the chance to start fresh, to rebuild. As I sat in the quiet of the living room, I knew that there was still a long journey ahead, one of healing and redefining our lives. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful, as though we could finally move forward without the shadow of betrayal looming over us. With the custody battle behind us, life began to settle into a new rhythm. It wasn't easy, but each day felt a bit lighter, as if a fog was lifting. Lily and I fell into a routine that brought a strange sense of peace. Mornings were spent in laughter as I packed her lunches and listened to her stories. She was my anchor, her innocence and joy reminding me daily of what I was fighting for. Though Emma still had visitation rights, she kept her distance. Her appearances were sporadic at first, then consistent but brief. Each time she came to pick up Lily, she looked worn and reserved, her guilt etched into her face. I greeted her with polite neutrality, keeping things civil for Lily's sake. In many ways, our exchanges felt like we were two strangers forced into a shared duty. The warmth and familiarity we once shared now buried beneath layers of resentment and regret. Despite the awkwardness, I focused on giving Lily a life filled with love and stability. We spent weekends exploring nearby parks, taking trips to the beach, and bonding over things we never had time for before. My relationship with her deepened, each small moment feeling precious. I noticed how much she loved animals, so we started volunteering at a local animal shelter. It became our special thing, a way for us to give back while creating new memories. As weeks turned into months, I took strides toward rebuilding not just my life, but also my spirit. I joined a local support group for single fathers, where I found camaraderie with others who'd faced similar situations. Sharing my story and hearing theirs was oddly healing. It made me realize I wasn't alone in my pain and that there were others fighting similar battles, learning how to move forward one day at a time. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The quiet streets and cool night air offered a sense of solitude I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. I found myself thinking about Emma, not with anger, but with acceptance. She'd made her choices, and while they'd hurt, I was finally at a place where I could let go of that pain. Holding on to it had weighed me down long enough. Now, it was time to let it drift away, to find closure in my own way. As I walked back to the house, I looked up at Lily's bedroom window and felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just healing for myself. I was doing it for her, to be the father she deserved. The next morning, as I made her breakfast, Lily looked at me with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Daddy, I love spending time with you," she said. Her words so simple, yet so full of meaning. "I love spending time with you too, sweetheart," I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude. Life was still full of challenges, and there would always be bumps along the way, but for the first time in months, I felt like we were on solid ground. We were building something new, something honest and strong. And as I looked at my daughter's smiling face, I knew that this was just the beginning of our journey forward. Months went by, and life with Lily became the center of my world. The routines we created, our weekly movie nights, Saturday morning pancake sessions, and Sunday park outings, filled the house with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. But the past had a way of creeping up, lingering in the corners of my mind, reminding me of the scars that hadn't fully healed. One evening, I received a text from Emma. She hadn't reached out in weeks except to arrange pickups and drop-offs for Lily. Her message was brief. Asterisk, can we meet? I'd like to talk. Asterisk, I stared at the text, conflicted. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to push away any attempt from her to re-enter my life. But another part, the part that still needed closure, knew this conversation was necessary. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, a neutral ground far from the memories of home. When I arrived, she was already there, seated by the window, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked up as I approached, a faint smile tugging at her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" Emma hesitated, taking a sip of her coffee before speaking. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her gaze fixed on the table between us. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed to say it, to take responsibility. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. It stirred something in me, a lingering sadness, yes, but also a sense of finality. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound acceptance of what we'd lost. I appreciate you saying that, I replied, my tone steady. I've moved on, Emma. My focus is on Lily now, on giving her a life that's stable and full of love. Emma nodded, her face softening. I'm glad to hear that. She's lucky to have you. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, struggling to keep her composure. I wish things could have been different, but I understand now what I gave up. We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. In that quiet moment, I realized that this was the closure I'd been searching for. The pain, the betrayal, they were part of my past, but they didn't define my future. And sitting here, across from Emma, I felt a strange sense of peace. As we parted ways, I didn't feel the ache that had once accompanied thoughts of her. Instead, I felt lighter, as though a chapter had finally closed. I walked back to my car with a clear mind and a steady heart, ready to embrace the life I was building with Lily. When I got home, I found her in the living room, coloring a picture. She looked up as I walked in, a smile lighting up her face. Daddy, look at what I made. I knelt down beside her, admiring her drawing. A colorful house with two smiling figures holding hands. That's beautiful, Lily, I said, feeling a swell of pride and love. In her eyes, I saw all the reason I needed to keep moving forward, to leave the past firmly behind. Are we happy now, Daddy? She asked, her innocent question catching me off guard. I hugged her, my heart full. Yes, sweetie, I whispered. We're happy now. With Emma's apology and our conversation behind me, I found myself able to breathe more freely. The weight of resentment and bitterness lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and a strange optimism. The future felt open, uncharted, and for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to what lay ahead. I threw myself into making a home for Lily that was filled with warmth and laughter. Our little house became a haven, one filled with her drawings, her laughter echoing through the rooms, and the smell of our weekend baking experiments. I hung up her latest artwork on the fridge, and she proudly pointed it out to anyone who visited, which usually meant her grandparents or Mark, who had become a regular presence in our lives. Mark had been my support through everything, and as I rebuilt my life, he was there, reminding me that even the worst situations could lead to something better. We'd started going to a gym together, a small routine to bring a sense of normalcy and self-care back into my life. Lily thought it was hilarious when I tried to show off my muscles, laughing and pointing as she wrapped her tiny hands around my biceps, declaring them smaller than hers. One Saturday, we were at a local park, and I noticed a woman with two young children nearby, watching us with a friendly smile. She had a gentle energy about her, the kind that made you feel at ease. Lily, ever the social butterfly, ran over to pet her dog, a small, scruffy thing that wagged its tail at her. The woman laughed, introduced herself as Claire, and we struck up a conversation while watching our kids play. It felt natural, easy, and before I knew it, we were laughing like old friends, sharing parenting stories, and even trading a few embarrassing tales from our pasts. She was kind and grounded, with a warmth that made me feel strangely comfortable, like meeting someone I'd known for years. After that day, we started running into each other more often. At the park, the grocery store, even at the library's story hour for kids. Over time, our conversations grew deeper, and a friendship began to blossom. She invited us over for a barbecue with her kids, and before long, our families were sharing dinners and playdates, slowly intertwining in a way that felt natural and unforced. One evening, after I'd helped her clean up following one of these dinners, Claire and I sat on her back porch, talking as the stars came out. The kids were asleep, the night was still, and in that quiet moment, I felt a pull towards something more than friendship. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, but I pushed it aside, not wanting to rush into anything. But as we sat there, our laughter quieting into a comfortable silence, I knew something had shifted in me. I was no longer looking back, bound by the shadows of the past. For the first time, I was fully present, hopeful for what might come next. Claire looked over at me, her eyes warm and understanding. "You deserve happiness, you know," she said softly. "And Lily does too." Her words resonated deeply, and I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. I didn't know what the future held with Claire, but I felt ready to take that first step. Whatever came next, I was open to it, unafraid. As the weeks went by, Claire and I grew closer, our friendship deepening with each shared moment. She was patient, understanding, and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. I appreciated her kindness, the way she welcomed both me and Lily into her life without any hesitation. It was new, this feeling of being seen and appreciated, and it filled a space I hadn't realized was empty. One Saturday, we planned a trip to a nearby lake with the kids. Claire packed a picnic, and we spent the day on the shore, letting the kids splash in the water and play in the sand while we watched from a distance, laughing at their antics. There was a lightness to the day, a warmth that felt like coming home, even though we were miles away from any house. After lunch, as the kids played nearby, Claire turned to me, her gaze steady. "How are you really doing?" she asked, her voice gentle. I thought about her question, realizing that I hadn't allowed myself to fully reflect on my life since the custody battle ended. "I'm better," I said, the words feeling truer than they had in a long time. "Lily and I are happy. We've found a new rhythm, a new normal." Claire nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You deserve that. She deserves it too. And it seems like you're doing an amazing job." Her words struck a chord in me, a deep sense of validation I hadn't known I needed. Before I could stop myself, I reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling as natural as breathing. She didn't pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with mine, her gaze meeting mine with a warmth that radiated through me. In that moment, I knew I was ready for more. I was ready to let go of the fears and doubts that had lingered, the memories of betrayal that had kept me guarded. Claire was different. She wasn't a part of my past, but someone I could imagine in my future. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the lake, we walked hand in hand back to where the kids were playing, the silence between us speaking volumes. There was no need for words. The simplicity of the moment said everything. This was the beginning of something real, something that felt like a new chapter in a book I hadn't expected to write. The drive home was quiet, the kids dozing in the back seat, and Claire's hand resting in mine as I drove. It felt surreal, but in the best way. I glanced over at her, and she smiled, her expression filled with the same contentment I felt. I couldn't remember the last time life felt this peaceful, this right. When we pulled up to her house, she turned to me, hesitating as if searching for the right words. "I know this might seem fast, but I'm here. Whenever you're ready," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "I'm ready now," I replied, my voice steady. I knew I'd found something worth holding on to, something worth cherishing. We shared a quiet moment, and as she leaned in, our first kiss was soft, tender, and filled with all the hope I'd been afraid to feel. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise of new beginnings, of healing, and of a future that felt brighter than anything I could have imagined. Life with Claire quickly became a natural extension of my world with Lily. Our relationship grew slowly, each step taken with care, balancing our shared pasts with the excitement of something new. For the first time, I felt that I was truly moving forward, creating memories free from the shadows of betrayal. As summer faded into autumn, Claire and I found ourselves spending more time together as a family. We celebrated Halloween with the kids, dressing up as a silly family of superheroes, much to Lily's delight. Thanksgiving rolled around, and we hosted a dinner together, merging our families and creating traditions of our own. Watching Claire with Lily filled me with gratitude, a profound sense of how lucky I was to have found someone who genuinely cared for us both. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Claire and I sat by the fire, sipping tea and sharing stories from our lives before we met. We laughed about the embarrassing moments, shared the bittersweet memories, and even talked about the painful experiences that had led us here. She listened with empathy, never judging, her warmth wrapping around me like a blanket. She reached out, her fingers tracing mine. "I want you to know," she began softly, "that whatever the future brings, I'm here for you and Lily. We'll face it together." Her words filled me with a sense of security I hadn't realized I'd been missing. In her, I'd found more than just a partner. I'd found a confidant, someone who truly understood the weight of what I'd been through and accepted every part of me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel loved. I felt whole. As months passed, I noticed the changes in Lily, too. She was happier, more at ease, and even closer to Claire than I dared to hope. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those big, hopeful eyes. "Daddy," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is Claire going to be part of our family forever?" Her question caught me off guard, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" I asked, brushing a stray curl from her face. She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, she makes you happy, and I like having her here." I leaned down, kissing her forehead. "Then maybe one day, she will be, honey. We'll just have to wait and see." In that moment, I knew that our journey had come full circle. The pain, the heartbreak, it had all led to this, to a place of healing and new beginnings. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a quiet joy that filled every corner of my heart. As I turned off the light and left Lily's room, I felt the certainty of our future unfold before me. With Claire by my side and Lily's unwavering support, we were more than just a family. We were a new beginning, and I knew, as I held Claire's hand later that night, that we were ready to face whatever came next together. Thank you for following along on this journey. Have you ever faced a similar challenge, or know someone who has? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories.